Hi, everyone. As I said a few minutes ago, my name is Emmy Amaretti, and I am our ACU Online Writing Center Assistant Director. I am here tonight with our lovely Basil's got a pirate ship in the chat.
I know, I saw
Uh,
that.
with our resident pirate, Sarah Tabuada, who is our multilingual writing specialist. Say hi, Sarah.
Ahoy, everybody.
Ahoy to Pirate Sarah. During tonight's webinar, we're going to be discussing strategies for successful college writing. And we have designed this webinar especially to be helpful for our new ACU Online undergraduate students, including those who may have been out of school for a while. That was a path I followed with my own undergraduate journey. So I have some insights to share about getting back into the swing of things. Keep in mind that tomorrow we will send out links to the recording and slide deck for the webinar, and the links in the slide deck will be active, so you can click to all of our awesome resources if you open that. And during the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat, and we will pause as needed to do our best to answer them. So we've got 3 learning objectives for this webinar. By the end of tonight's session, we will summarize characteristics and types of college writing, review some basics of APA formatting, and explore tips for college writing success. Our first learning objective is to summarize major characteristics and types of college writing. And we're going to break that down 3 different ways. We're going to talk about what is college writing, what are some types of college writing, and how should we approach college writing. Sarah's going to get us started.
So, what is college or air quotes academic writing? Usually it means a bit more formal and objective tone. So, we might not use things like so or couldn't, can't, your contractions. That's considered a bit more conversational or casual. And since our academic writing aims to be more formal, those are usually things that we try and avoid. It's also thesis driven. So you're wanting an idea, a main idea that you're supporting with evidence, usually from course readings, maybe from outside sources. And evidence-based is super important because most of your ACU papers are going to be APA formatted. So properly citing what source you're using or referencing, which we will go over in future slides, is important. And you're using, it's a lot of critical thinking. You're analyzing, evaluating, synthesizing, super important. And as Basil and I have talked about in some of the webinars we've done together, you want to be concise, clear, try not to go off topic, fall down the rabbit hole, and stay according to what the assignment prompt is asking you to answer.
Okay,
Anything I missed?
I don't think so. So let's move on to what are some types of college writing. We're all familiar with writing an essay. You might be asked to write a paper where you analyze someone else's work. You may do a research paper where you need to go find some sources and see how they support a central idea. You may need to do a synthesis of research where you're talking about how different sources come together to elucidate a common point. You may need to do a literature review on a topic where you're looking at all sorts of different topics that relate to it. You might need to do a presentation in the form of PowerPoint slides or slides from another program. You might need to give a speech. And since we are in an online learning environment, you will be doing probably a lot of discussion posts and emails to instructors. So we'll discuss those last 2 a little more later.
So, how should we approach a college writing assignment? A really good place to start is obviously to review the assignment description and the rubric. What are you being asked to do? And Sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming because there's a lot of steps, but it's good to break them down and go look at them one at a time, maybe outline the assignment, grouping the questions into sections. You can also make your questions into headings within your outline. That way you're making sure that you're addressing everything and where you'll be addressing each question within the assignment. And that can all be, you might start by just copy and pasting the entire rubric or assignment description onto a Word document, and then maybe bolding your questions and turning them into headings to kind of get a bit organized before you start answering them. And as far as answering your questions, you can transform them into a sentence starter to begin each paragraph or section. And this is just a nice little starting place. And an example we're going to use for this webinar is the ISO 118 week 7 assignment, Decolonization in the Global South, a case study. So we'll be looking at that as we move along our slides.
Yes. So here's our example. It's a case study for a history class. So before we start planning or writing a paper, the first step is always to review the assignment description and the rubric. So for this assignment, we have a little video. We can see that it's a history assignment. We need to write a case study, and we will be picking from one of these countries that is listed here. We're going to be doing some research using the sources that they've given as examples. And then after that, the assignment lists 5 questions that you need to answer, or question sets. Introduce the colonial history of the country, cover the origins of anti-colonial independence struggles, discuss who the important leaders and organizations were in the struggle for independence, describe how independence was achieved, and analyze what the country is currently like. There's some more points about following APA guidelines, but before we move on, we want to make sure that we're looking really closely at the rubric at the bottom, because it's going to tell us how everything is weighted. So we've got 20 points each for the first 2 questions, 40 points for the next 2 questions combined. Oops, I went forward. Sorry,
Uh,
that was a mistake. Okay, here we go. So 40 points for the next 2 questions combined. And then we have 20 points for criteria E, question set E, and 10 points for each for writing clearly and coherently and grammar and spelling. And then 10 more for making sure you hit the word limit and following APA guidelines. One thing to note in particular in this assignment is they have criteria C and D combined for 40 points together. So that might be a hint about how we can, darn it keeps doing things, about how we can organize this paper. So after we go through and we look at all the rubric criteria, we can consider how we're going to combine them. Questions into headings. So on the next slide, I've taken each question and circled some points. Colonial history of the country, origins of anti-colonial independence. Those next 2 that they said we might want to group together, and what your country is currently like. So I'm thinking maybe 4 headings. Colonial history, origins of the struggle for independence, achieving independence, and if I were writing about Algeria, Algeria today. If you wanted, you could go ahead and outline under those, or you can start pasting in the questions, which Sarah mentioned earlier. So this is great if you have really detailed questions that you need to answer. There I put in 2 sets of questions because remember I was going to answer 2 sets under there. So after you do that, you can consider the questions and how you want to divide them up. In this first part, I decided I wanted to write 2 separate paragraphs, one about the colonial history, who colonized, when, and then another one about what life was like. So I want to take the question and rewrite it as a sentence. So I might write, in year blank, blank country colonized Algeria in pursuit of. And once I do that, I can erase the question and move on to my second question. What was life like under colonial rule? And I might write, under colonial rule, life differed for the colonized and the colonizers. For the colonized, this is what happened. In contrast, the colonizers blank. And you can actually start writing these question or sentence starters or this placeholder text even before you have done all of your research and reading for the week. It just kind of sets up a framework that you can go through. And again, this is really helpful if you have really specific questions in your assignments, as we often have a lot of times in our ACU Online assignments. For a more an assignment where you have less detail in the questions, you could take this approach and outline underneath each heading, put the major topics that you want to discuss based on what you know. But again, if the questions are really detailed, you could take this approach, paste the questions in, and kind of turn each one into a sentence starter to get you where you need to go to start filling in your information and writing.
We had a great question in the chat since
Okay.
the assignment provided a list of countries to pick from.
hmm
What if you have a different country in mind? Can you just go ahead and write about that instead?
In that
And I think,
case, I like your answer of reaching out to the professor and asking them if it's okay, because sometimes they might say it's okay, and sometimes they might say, no, we really need to follow the instructions in the assignment. So totally
good thing
agree
we're
with
gonna
Sarah's
be
chat response.
good thing we're gonna be going over emails later on.
Absolutely. It's a great tie-in question. So some other points that we would consider related to um, reading the assignment and reviewing it is our word count, which would give us the breadth and the depth expected. 250 words is considered to be about one double space type page. So for the assignment that we just were looking at, it was 1,000 words. So if we used that rule, we'd get about 4 double space type pages. And when we looked at the rubric, we saw that they were basically taking 5 question groups and weighting each one equally. So that's going to give us a clue of how much time we should spend on each part. If the sections are weighted equally, then you want to have about the same amount of text. And in that one part where they combine the 2 sections and to make it 40 points, then you would still kind of make sure that that whole section answering both those sets of questions was about double the length of the other sections. So it's just a good way to help guide your writing and level of detail. If something's worth 10 points out of 100, you don't want 3/4 of your paper to focus on it. We do want to remember that your title and references pages are not included in the word count of your paper. So if you select the text to count your words, don't select the title and the references page. Sometimes assignments tell you you have to have a certain number of sources. If it says 3 sources, please make sure you have 3 sources. A variety of sources can be good. You can look at journals, reports, books, and videos. If your course assignment has given you videos or books or journal articles to read, and it says to use the course resources, that's what you should be using. If it says you need to find additional resources, that means you need to have resources outside of what they gave you in the course readings. If you're looking up new sources, it's good to have current sources, which usually means in the last 5 years. If it says that you need to have academic sources, that can mean journal articles, books, other things through our ACU online library. We have a lot of good things that you can access through there. APA format, we do make sure we need to make sure we follow it precisely if it asks you to use APA format. Always plan in advance of your assignment due date. If you know you have something due, please don't wait until the night before to start writing. Instead, plan to use the writing process over a few days, which Sarah is going to tell us about in a few minutes, a little bit more. But here's the writing process in general. When we talk about the writing process, we're talking about pre-write, write, um, revise, edit, and we like to stick in this new reflect and review stage because it's really helpful. Pre-writing means that you are brainstorming about the assignment. What are my ideas? What am I going to write about? How am I going to answer these questions? And then planning. That's when you might set up your Word document with an outline or that question transformation strategy that we went over a little while ago. Um, the outline could also relate to your thesis and your main points that you're going to make. Um, Also, planning is when you're going to do your research and find your sources. You can also add sources into your outline, or if you use that strategy where you complete the sentence or write some sentences that you're going to complete, you can make notes for the sources there. Then we get into the writing stage. That's where you write from your outline and you just write. You want to make sure you get your ideas down. You don't want to get stuck on trying to find the perfect word for something, and I have the tendency to do this when I write. I, when I was younger, I would spend 30 minutes trying to think of a word, and only a few years ago, I have finally realized I can do that later. I don't need to do that right now. I just need to put the idea down and then I'll go back later. And if I think I need a new word here, I can make a little note to myself in the margin. This needs to be better and go back and think about it later. The neat reflect and review stage after you write is when you consider feedback from peers, perhaps the instructor if they ask you to turn it in or you ask them for some help, a tutor like us, and also reflect and review based on what you think yourself. Take those notes that you wrote to yourself or go back and read it. It's really good if you can take some time away from the paper and then go back and reflect and review on what you've got. And that will lead to your revision process where you rearrange. Do I need more information that I need to research more? Add in transitions and signal phrases, address the notes to yourself. And last, after you get all your content in order and all those bigger things, you'll go back and edit and proofread for mechanical correctness and the things like APA formatting that we're going to touch on in a little while.
Oh, okay, I'm up. So
Yes.
this is a little visual that I made
Yay.
just to show how writing is so the opposite of linear. Usually when we make our outline, we think that we're just going to be following the steps precisely, and that is not always the case. We might start brainstorming or free writing. I really like that. And it's what Emmy was talking about. You just write without stopping or correcting yourself. You're just kind of getting all your thoughts out of your head and onto your document. And then you can come back later and clean it up. But you want to just get everything on your document. That gives you a better perspective of it. And at any point, whether it's brainstorming and you haven't even written anything, you can make an appointment with one of the Writing Center tutors to get help just brainstorming and getting started, maybe creating an outline. So don't think that you have to wait to actually have the whole paper written before you can reach out to a tutor. You can do that at any point in the writing process,
Oops.
which kind of ends up looking a lot less circular and more like a hot mess, as shown here by this doodle that goes all over the place. But eventually you get to the finish line and you have hopefully a paper that you feel really good about submitting to your professor. And all of us here at the Writing Center are, of course, here to help. and you can make multiple appointments per week. So you have multiple opportunities to have it revised, not just doing your self-reflection, but getting input from other people so that when you do finally submit, you feel really good about it and can move on to your next assignment.
And I just want to echo Sarah's comment that you can come see us anytime along this route, and we will, if you're stuck in a curve, we'll help get you going straight again, and you will end up with a lovely, orderly product at the end. And if you follow the writing process yourself, you will also end up with a nice, orderly product at the end, even if it's looks so messy and recursive as you're going. There is an end in sight.
Here, here.
Yes. So now that we've talked about the writing process and how we want to tackle an assignment, let's talk about some rhetorical strategies that you might be using as you express the ideas in your paper. One is compare and contrast. Compare, you're telling how things are alike. Contrast, you're telling how they're different. Cause and effect, how one thing leads to another. Classify and divide. Classifying is when you take things and you merge them into groups based on how they're similar. And dividing is when you take a larger concept and you break it down into smaller bits. Definition is when you define a term. This might be in the context of a larger piece of writing, or you might have a whole paper that we call an extended definition where you need to spend the whole paper defining the term and your interpretation of it. There's an illustration paper where you use examples and illustrations to help your reader understand a concept. And there's a process analysis where you break things down and either tell someone how to do something or explain why something happened. So any topic can be developed with these approaches. And if you think about the paper that we just previewed, that history paper, it kind of pulled in a lot of this because they wanted you at the beginning to compare and contrast how the colonizers and the people who were colonized experienced the colonization stage. They wanted you to have cause and effect. What were some movements that influenced the drive for independence in this colony? There would certainly be terms that you needed to define. There would be illustrations where you tell about the people who contributed to the efforts, and the process analysis. The whole paper is sort of a process analysis as you're considering how did they get colonized? How did they then realize that they wanted to push against this colonization to achieve independence? And what steps did they follow to actually get there? And at the end, there was cause and effect initiated as, or indicated as well, because they wanted you to talk about how are the way things are in the country today still evidence that of the colonial period. So any topic can be developed with these approaches, and you may end up with all of them in the same paper. We said earlier that another type of writing that you will do a lot in your online program is writing discussion posts and responses. So in the initial post, they will give you a question and they will usually ask you to apply it or answer it using the readings and the resources that they've provided with you with for the week. So for the initial post, you will kind of use that process that we talked about earlier. Lay out the questions and figure out how you're going to answer each one and reference your readings and resources throughout and make sure you cite them at the end. Something that is a little different. Oh, do we have a question? Oh, Basil says,
Yeah.
like, because of Malawi's acute shortage of lemurs, it will never be as cool as Madagascar, even though I'm sure it's a very nice country. Considine 2023. Basil, are we directly quoting? We would need some locator information, which we're going to go over in a little while. Basil knows a lot about lemurs. Okay. So on to our peer response, which if I had known Basil was going to interject that, Sarah, I guess I could have written our sample peer response in response to the lemurs, but we
That
written one in response to a favorite Sarah topic that we'll get to in just a minute. Sometimes if you want to do a peer response, you can use what we call the ABC approach. Acknowledge what the other student stated kindly, build on their content by stating your analysis or perspective on what they said. Make sure in your response you incorporate course content or outside sources with appropriate attribution, just like when you responded to your initial post, make sure you're tying it in. And last, you want to challenge with a thought-provoking discussion enhancing question that encourages further dialogue. And oh, Victoria says, Basil, I used to work with lemurs every day. You guys need to
is
have a
so cool.
chat later. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go on to Sarah's my Sarah example as Basil talks about lemurs. Okay, so pretend that Sarah wrote a discussion post about why transitions are important in writing. This is a
That
way
sounds like something I would write.
I know. So I've used the
Very
ABC
on point.
approach to respond to Sarah's fictional or the fictitious discussion that Sarah wrote initially. So first I would acknowledge what Sarah wrote. I appreciate Sarah's analogy that transitions in writing are like a GPS to guide the reader. So I'm saying thank you, and I'm kind of summing up what she said. To build on that, I say, after I saw her post, I was reading an article and found myself really thinking about why the author chose to put words like however in certain spots. Then I go in and I add some reference to my resources. This week's handout from the American Psychological Association 2023 echoed Sarah's ideas that transitions help readers understand the relationship between ideas and make papers flow smoothly. Then to kind of challenge or extend that, I added, the American Psychological Association also made the opposite point that using too many transitions can slow a reader down. Sarah, do you know any strategies for how writers can determine when they use too many transitions? So hopefully that would invite Sarah to come back to the discussion board and answer me, and it would keep us in conversation about the week's topics. And other people could join
Oh,
in too.
oh, I would definitely have much to contribute to your question.
I know. So come to the Writing Center and talk to Sarah about transitions. She will give you the lowdown
The lowdown.
on all of it. So that's a sample discussion response. Next, we're going to talk about another type of writing that you will perhaps encounter often. You will need to write emails to the instructor. And again, earlier we had a student who is here tonight ask a question about what if I have a different idea related to the assignment? And we said the best thing to do is check with your instructor. So you might want to follow this pattern to send an email. And again, if I had known that that was going to happen in this webinar, I could have used that for the example, but I have a different example right now. So in the subject line, you can briefly identify your question. So pretend we're in BIBO 101 and it's week 3, assignment 1, and I have a question. I could call it BIBO 101, week 3, assignment 1, question. In the first line, I would introduce myself. So who am I? What course am I in? So the professor knows who they're talking to. For the second line, I could ask a question. And for the third, I would thank the instructor for their time and attention. So let's look at some examples.
This is what we want to avoid. If we just put question in the subject line, that doesn't really tell the professor anything about what's happening, other than there's a question. And then we have, what am I supposed to do with the assignment? I'm lost here. M. Well, as we mentioned at the very beginning, in academic writing, we tend to go more formal. This isn't just for your discussion posts or essays. but any communication, including when you're emailing your instructors. This looks more like you're sending a text message to a friend. So now that we know what we want to avoid, let's look at an example of an email that we might actually send our professor.
So here is our more appropriate email with the subject line mentioned earlier, Bibo 101, Week 3, Assignment 1 question. Hello, Dr. New. I am Marty K. Lerner from your Bibo 101 course. Regarding our Week 3, Assignment 1, the Mark Literary Analysis Outline and Reflection, do we need to include outside sources and format citations according to APA guidelines? I appreciate your time and any guidance you can provide. I enjoy your class and would like to do my best. Sincerely, Marty K. Lerner. So here, the student has identified who they are because it's helpful to your professor to contextualize who they're talking to, especially since they have limited direct interaction with you, maybe during your weekly Zoom session if you have one, but it's good for them to just kind of have something to jog their memory. Um, and then specific details about the assignment. Week 3, Assignment 1, I reminded them what the topic is because maybe they're teaching multiple courses and they need something, again, to jog their memory a little bit. And then a very specific question. I don't understand if we need to include outside sources or citations based on the way the assignment's written in Canvas. And then last, just say thank you. They are more likely to respond if you express appreciation to them. And they do lots of hard work. So it's good to thank people when they help you anyway, I always say. And they will extend that same kindness and gratitude back to you. Sincerely, Marty K. Lerner. Do we have another comment? Or are we still talking about lemurs?
We are, the
Lemurs.
lemur discussion
Okay,
is ongoing.
awesome. All right. I love the background conversations we get here. So while we're still talking about lemurs, we will talk about learning objective 2, reviewing the basics of APA formatting. We're going to break this down into general APA format, like of your document, source integration and citation, and some points about grammar and style where we talk about point of view and active voice. So in general, for APA formatting, your paper should be double-spaced throughout, use 1-inch margins on all sides, and be in Times New Roman or a similar 12-point font. APA also includes a page number in the upper right-hand corner of every page, including the title page, which we're going to show you an example of in a minute. You can use our ACU paper template. We have an undergraduate version and a more complex version. If you click on this link to our resources page on our website, you can use the template. The best way to do that is to download it in Word and work on it that way, because if you try to open it in Google Docs, for instance, it might mess up some of the formatting. And one reason we have the template is to make sure your formatting is APA aligned and you don't lose points for maybe one of your margins being the wrong size. So APA has required sections. They do require a title page. Sometimes as you advance on, you may be required to write an abstract, which is kind of a short summary of the whole paper, but not all instructors or assignments require an abstract. So that's why we have the parenthetical qualification there. You'll have a main body of your paper, and then you'll have a references page at the end, which is separate with references at the top. For the title page, I mentioned a minute ago that you're going to have a page number on the title page in APA. It's going to be page 1, and that's not something you have in all formats or in all writing settings. So again, it's in our template. If you use our template, it's there already. You're going to put the title of your paper centered and in bold, a couple of double space lines down from the top. Then you're going to hit, have 2 double spaces with your name. Usually we write first, middle, last name. So I would write Emily C. Amarati if I were formatting in APA. On the line after that, you put your affiliation, which is usually your department, a colon, and then Abilene Christian University. So maybe if you were doing communication disorders, you could write communication disorders, colon, AC, or Abilene Christian University. Next, put your course, the course abbreviation and the name of the course, then the instructor, and then the due date. In the main body of the paper, you will have, again, continue the page numbers at the top. So the first page of your paper where you have actual writing will be page 2. You're going to center and bold the title at the top of the page. Even though it's on the title page, it also needs to be at the top of the first page of text. You can use headings. As we mentioned earlier, we were talking about turning your questions into the major headings, and like level 1 headings we see here. The APA level 1 heading is bold and centered, just like the title at the top of the page. If you have level 2 headings, that would be for a subsection within a major section. Those are at the margin. They're still bold, but at the margin. And all the headings in APA are written in regular title case. So the way that you would standardize a title, except in APA, there's one little idiosyncrasy that isn't always followed, and that's that all words with 4 letters or more get capitalized. In some styles, like the word with, it says here, replace this with your section heading. Sometimes with would not be capitalized in other formats, but in APA, with is capitalized in a title. And we can also see that there's no extra space before or after the title or subheadings, and there's no extra spacing between the paragraphs either. APA is just very consistently double spaced. The only place that we actually see an extra space is between the title on the title page. We'll go back and see. Is this extra space right here between the title of the paper and your name on the title page? Everything else is double spaced straight through.
And the title on the title page is the same title that I would write there at the top of page 2.
Yes, word for word, exactly the same.
Okie dokies.
All right. So now we're going to talk some about source integration. And first we're going to start off, I can't talk tonight. Start off talking. I always have this problem in every webinar, don't I?
Oh, that
Start
makes me
off,
feel good. I thought it was just the ones with me.
no, it's every single one, every day of my life. So we're going to talk about some choices you have to make when you're integrating information from sources. And namely, that is, when are you going to quote versus when are you going to paraphrase? So if you decide that someone has said something in such a unique and marvelous way that you want to use their words, you can directly quote them. And that means that you will copy their words, word for word, and use quotation marks around the copied words, and make sure that you cite according to APA guidelines, which Sarah is going to tell us about in a little while. Unless there is some really special reason that you think that their wording's really fabulous, it is generally preferred that you rewrite other people's ideas in your own words. That helps you keep your own voice prominent in your writing, and it also really shows the reader that you have not just copied other people's words, but really processed what they were saying and applied it to your own writing context. So when you use your own words to convey information, you do not use quotation marks around the paraphrased idea. You do still have to write a citation, because even though you're writing it in your own words, you're still borrowing an idea, and you need to give attribution for that. And when you're paraphrasing, make sure you change both the words and the order of the words from the original source to avoid plagiarism. Sarah, this one's you.
Yes. Okie dokies. So here we have some examples of quotes with parenthetical citations. So we have, And this is something I wrote for funsies because I am a Mark Twain fan, or my dad is a Mark Twain fan, and I have been brainwashed my entire life. But here we go. In the long-standing and seemingly never-ending debate between cats and dogs, Mark Twain shares that if man could be crossed with a cat, it would improve man, but it would deteriorate the cat, highlighting in his unique way that while dogs may be man's best friend, cats reign supreme, which I totally agree with him because I love cats. And then at the end, I have my citation, I have the author's last name, the date, the year it was published, and then instead of a page number, I indicate that this is from paragraph 1. That at the end is my parenthetical citation, but we also have the option of doing a narrative citation where we weave the author date information into the sentence. So that might look like this. Mark Twain is not the only writer with an affinity for felines. In fact, the long-standing tradition of author-cat partnerships, which includes Hemingway, Yeats, and Dickens, is best summarized by Robertson Davies. Authors like cats because they are such quiet, lovable, wise creatures, and cats like authors for the same reasons. The narrative citation is when I introduce that this quote is from Robertson Davies. At the end of the sentence, I have a parenthetical citation because I actually got that quote from another source. Sabo 2007 actually cited Robertson Davies, so I am indicating that this is a citation within a source by saying as cited in the original source that I read.
Sarah, Basil wants to know if we can quote an entire paragraph this way.
Um, so according to the higher powers that are APA, quotes that are 40 or more words need to be formatted as block quotes, which look a bit different than regular quotes. And you can, but if you are quoting an entire paragraph, then you want that to be just one. You don't want to have a ton of block quotes because, as Emmy mentioned before, you want to paraphrase to show that you understand the information. So one block quote is permissible, but it's formatted a bit differently than regular quotes.
And if you do quote that much information, make sure that there's a really good reason for it and make sure that you comment on it a lot so that they understand why you have chosen to take all of this text from another author. Usually, if you have a really long quote, it's a good exercise to see if you can just find the most important or salient words and quote
Mm-hmm,
those, and then maybe sum up the rest of it in your own words, because you can do that as well.
mm-hmm.
Let me see. My cursor is not letting me advance slides now. I'm having cursor problems tonight. Mouse problems. So
Mouse.
we also have,
Someone call the exterminator.
you have all the cats here, so maybe they
All
can
right,
help.
I'll call in the troops. They'll handle it.
Glue traps will help. Yes. But not for my finger. I don't want my finger on my mouse in a glue trap. That would be bad. So here's some more information on citation and referencing. We just talked about direct quotes. Now let's talk about what you need to do if there's a paraphrase. So here's some more examples that Sarah has put together for us. The first one is a paraphrase with a parenthetical citation. Falsely balanced news coverage can distort the public's perception of expert consensus on an issue. Kaler, comma, 2016. So in the parentheses, we put the author's last name, then a comma, and then the year. For a paraphrase, you don't need the page number according to APA guidelines, but if you were directly quoting Kaler, you could add P.3 for the page number. Or if for some reason, maybe your instructor says, please put the page number, they might ask you to do that, in which case you would want to add that there. And also, on very rare occasions, if you are perhaps paraphrasing a really specific statistic or something, and you want to make sure the reader can find it in the text, APA does say, you can put the page number there. But if you're just kind of summarizing or paraphrasing ideas, even if it's in a whole 500-word book, APA does not always require, or they don't require the page number for a paraphrase. You can also paraphrase with a narrative citation. As Sarah explained narrative citations earlier, that's when the author's name is in your sentence. So here we've got Kaler, parentheses 2016. According to them, falsely balanced news coverage can distort the public's perception of expert consensus on an issue. And Sarah made a really good point when she and I were planning for this webinar, that it's always good to point out that when it's in parentheses, please put a comma between Kaler and 2016, the author, comma, year. But if you're writing it in your sentence, that 2016 is in parentheses already, so you don't need a comma between the author and the date information then. Down here at the bottom, we have a link to our most recent recording of our Intro to APA 7th edition webinar, which has a lot more information about citation and referencing. So we encourage you to click on that and go visit that webinar if you'd like some more help. Sarah, do we have anything else on citing and referencing specifically?
Yes, we have a question. Can you reuse a citation generator? And you totally can. If you're on the ACU library database and you find an article that you want to use, there is a feature that says cite, and if you click on it, it will show you what that source would look like cited in MLA, Chicago, APA, and you can literally copy paste from the library database onto your document for your assignment. And you can also use a generator. Sometimes there is some formatting issues that happen when you copy and paste it from either the library website or another generator. So you do want to make sure that you are double checking that your citations are formatted properly. One thing that the ACU library doesn't do, article titles are always written in sentence case, and that is not how they are written if you are copy pasting from the library database citation. So you want to make sure the citation generators will give you a good start, but once you paste it onto your document, you want to double check that the formatting is good. And you can always reach out to the Writing Center for help double checking that your citations are good to go, whether in text or on the references page.
We had another question of, if I have trouble finding all the source information, like on a website, can you still use the source? And yes, APA gives
Yes.
us ways that we can cite, and we can put in chat. Sarah, can you put the link to the APA website in the chat?
Here.
They have a lot of information about what to do, how to format things if you are missing information. And you are welcome to email us at the Writing Center if you have a question about a specific source, and we man our email, all day, and someone will answer pretty quickly if you have a specific citation question. Okay.
Okay.
I'm
There it
gonna
is.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm gonna zip right along because We have had such good questions. We're running a little on the later side. And we still have to talk about point of view and active and passive voice and tips. So, point of view means the perspective from which you're writing, and APA does have grammar guidelines related to point of view. A lot of times we think about point of view or perspective as boiling down to what pronouns we use in a paper. So APA style and most academic writing, even if you're not an APA, require third person, which means you'll be using words like one or they. So instead of referring to people in general by saying we must balance our academic pursuits with other responsibilities, we would use language like adult learners must balance their academic pursuits with other responsibilities. An exception is that APA actually requires first person, meaning saying I or we, if you are going to describe your own work or personal reactions as the author. So in APA, I would not write the researcher considered her experience as a non-traditional student. Instead, I would write, I considered my experience as a non-traditional student. Sarah mentioned earlier that APA is more formal, so we want to avoid contractions and things like that. We also want to avoid second person, like you or yours. For instance, I wouldn't write, you have to balance your academic pursuits with other responsibilities. We would stick to the third person simply because it gives you a more formal and objective tone. And the other thing we want to talk about in terms of kind of a grammar standpoint is active and passive voice. When we write in APA format, we should preference active voice. Active voice means that the subject of the sentence is performing the action of the sentence. So Gonzalez found that the hypothesis was accurate. I conducted the interviews via Zoom. Who did the finding? It was Gonzalez. Who did the conducting? It was me. So in most cases, we want to use active voice because it creates vivid, clearer, and more engaging text. Passive voice can be used if we don't know who the actor is, or if we want to emphasize the recipient of the action. In passive voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. So here, the hypothesis was found to be accurate. The hypothesis didn't do the finding. Somebody else did the finding of the hypothesis. Interviews were conducted via Zoom. Again, the interviews didn't do the conducting, but they were conducted by someone else. And then on to our last learning objective 3, which is just some, okay, Basil says, is this active voice? I was robbed by a lemur. The black and white ruffed lemur jumped on my shoulder, grabbed my wrist, and stole my banana. So your second sentence is active voice because the menacing lemur did all those things. The lemur jumped, the lemur grabbed, the lemur stole. But your first sentence is not because true story. Oh.
And you still love them? Wow.
So I was robbed by a lemur is not active voice because the lemur did the robbing, but I am the subject of the sentence, or I is the subject of the sentence. That hurts my brain to say. Thank you for always bringing the good stories, Basil. As we wrap up, we're going to quickly go through some general tips for college writing in APA format. So this is basically a review of what we've been talking about already. General tips for college writing. Please review the assignment and look over the rubric early. Reach out to the instructor with any questions or concerns using that email strategy we set up earlier. Set up the draft in a Word document according to the assignment specifications first. Remember, you can set it up and write sentence stems even if you haven't done all your research. And it's a good hint to write in Word because it helps you catch typos and other mistakes. Make sure you schedule out your writing process throughout the week if, for instance, it's a 1-week assignment, to give yourself time to apply all the stages of the writing process. Pre-write, write, that reflect and review stage, revise and edit, and proofread. Sarah, do we have other tips too?
Yes, we do. You can schedule an appointment, up to 2 appointments per week with the Writing Center, and you can schedule these 2 weeks ahead of time. And many students find it useful to use their Writing Center appointment as a pre-deadline for their assignment. So you might use your first appointment to help brainstorm if you're stuck in that part of it. However you want to split it up, but that is a useful tool for helping keep you on track. Mm, doo, 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 doo. Mm. And I am very big on celebrating small successes. So even if you feel like you are struggling, give yourself a pat on the back for reaching out, for getting help, asking for help. And if this is your first semester back in school after maybe not being in school for a while, it can be kind of daunting, but give yourself a grace period to get back into the swing of things because everyone is here to help, to make sure that you have a really awesome experience at ACU. So if you're struggling, please reach out, and hopefully by the end of your first semester, you are feeling better about handling everything. Am I missing anything?
Um, did we read Embrace Learning? Learning is a success. Anything you learn is a success. And we are all on the path together. So big heart emoji to Sarah because I love her statement that we are all here to help. We're all here to learn together and
Mm-hmm.
have shared successes. And, we'll have shared mistakes too, and we'll learn from them. Especially with APA formatting, because APA formatting can be challenging sometimes. And I will tell you that everyone who works at the Writing Center has been looking at APA for years, and we still have to check our examples and our APA handbook every day to figure things out. At least I do. So when you're working with APA formatting, please make sure you acknowledge all borrowed ideas through appropriate citation and referencing. Check the APA publication manual, as I do every day at some point, and other resources to verify your guidelines and see examples. Adhere to the tenets of APA style, such as using third versus first person and preferencing active voice. And we can't emphasize enough that we invite you to reach out to the Writing Center with any questions, even if it's a quick email to ask how to cite or reference a web page that is causing you some issues. We are always happy to help. So during tonight's webinar, we hit our whole hour. Wow. We summarized the major characteristics and types of college writing. We reviewed the basics of APA formatting, and we went over some tips for college writing success. We talked about Basil's having been attacked by a lemur, and turned his experience into grammatical examples, which made it even more fun. Before we go, let's go over a little bit about how you can contact the Online Writing Center, since we have emphasized throughout this entire webinar that we are just itching to help. You can check out the Online Writing Center group in my ACU. Sarah does a motivational quote every Tuesday, hashtag Motivation Tuesday, and we have some other resources linked there. You can watch this video for the steps to make an appointment and submit a paper. We have two types of appointments listed on our schedule. One is an email or asynchronous appointment. And in that case, you upload your paper and we send you feedback by email in 24 hours. When you make the appointment, you do not have to have the paper ready. Sarah said that, you can make your appointment 2 weeks ahead of time. And if it's at 3 o'clock on Wednesday in 2 weeks. You can upload your paper at 2:59 on Wednesday in 2 weeks, and that is all good. We'll send you feedback by email, and the title of that will be Writing Center Report. If you want to talk to somebody one-on-one, Sarah's our Zoom queen. I also offer some Zoom appointments, and our colleague Christy and our director Julie also Zooms. So you can go to the schedule at the time of a Zoom appointment that you schedule and click on the Zoom link to meet us and talk one-on-one about any stage of your writing. And all of our appointments are in Central Time. So we're spread throughout the nation. We use Central Time as just kind of a rule of thumb so that everybody's working on the same schedule. You can access many writing related resources on our online Writing Center website. Our submission process is, again, you go schedule an appointment at WC Online and then submit the paper to the appointment form. This is an outdated slide. Oops. Submit the paper to the appointment form, not to the Canvas box. You can contact us via email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can schedule an appointment at this link, and you can visit the Online Writing Center website. Some of the resources that we have available, we've already mentioned. For instance, the APA course paper template. We have a YouTube channel where we have other videos of our webinars. We have our Online Writing Center blog. And we have other webinars both on our website and on our YouTube channel. So here are 3 that might be helpful as you're getting in the swing of things. We have a tour of Online Writing Center resources with a special focus on our multilingual resources. Sarah made that video for us. We have a webinar on crafting rich responses for discussion board posts. So there's the slides and video for that. And here again are the links to the slides and the video for our most recent Intro to APA 7th edition webinar. And with that, we come to the end of our webinar on strategies for successful college writing. Sarah and Basil and I thank you for learning with us today.
Yeah.
So
And we had one last question.
okay.
Can I make an appointment to get tips on making slides, or is it just for papers? You most definitely can. You can also make an appointment if you want someone to look over a presentation. You can make a Zoom appointment if you would like to practice making your presentation before you have to
Excellent point.
actually do it for your class. So it isn't just papers, it is whatever you are needing help with.
Yep, we can upload text files of many kinds, sound files, video files, PowerPoint files, Excel spreadsheet files. You can submit anything that you're working on, and we are happy to help you. So thank you, Sarah, for chatting with
Yes.
me and everyone else tonight.
Yes, thank you for everyone that joined in on our fun little webinar.
It was fun, and we look forward to seeing you very soon at the Online Writing Center. Bye.
Bye, everyone.